Well, I think we will kick this off. Christina, are you good to go? I think you're our first presenter.
I think so. Let's just hope my internet is gonna hold out. I don't know why. You just never know.
Of course, and all the crazy things happen when you're
Right.
hosting a presentation. So,
That's right.
all
Okay,
right.
let's go. Um, all right. So with the people that are in here right now, I could have probably done a little more of like a 201. So feel free anyone to chime in on anything, if you want to add something to what I'm gonna say. But what's the basic level of school funding is that there are three different buckets that fund our local schools. And so that's federal through our federal taxes, that's state through our income taxes, and that's local at the local level through our property taxes and sales tax, which Medina is still currently, as far as I know, currently, as of today, when I searched to make sure, Medina is still the only county that has a sales tax that they use for their schools. Does anyone know that to not be true anymore? I don't think there were any sales tax issues on the ballot.
I
Okay,
think
so I'm
I
going to
think
go with
you're
it's still
yeah.
true as of
You,
today, which is actually kind of cool that Medina County has that.
I think it is still true.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of cool. And so just going back, so we have those three buckets. So we know that funding comes from three different places. In Ohio in 1997, that was the first time that Ohio's Supreme Court ruled Ohio's school funding system unconstitutional. And where information gets a little confusing is sometimes, particularly right now, where property taxes are a hot topic item, sometimes people will say the Supreme Court said that you can't use property taxes to fund schools. That's not what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court said that the over reliance on property taxes and not taking enough consideration into any other factors, that was unconstitutional. Between 1997 and the early 2000s, they repeated that ruling three more times. So four times, the way we funded schools was found to be unconstitutional. Um, Despite that, it was never fully fixed, and actually, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but it has actually gotten worse in the last 2 years. So what's happened since the Duralf ruling? Well, first, right before the Duralf ruling, we had Ohio's first voucher system, which was the Cleveland Scholarship for a limited number of Cleveland students. At that point in time, there's a ProPublica article about the Diocese of Cleveland wanted 1,200 students because their numbers were dropping. So they wanted 1,200 students to enroll in the diocese in the Catholic schools. And magically, in the first year of the Cleveland Scholarship, there were 1,200 vouchers available for Cleveland students. And again, that's in ProPublica. You can go back and find that article. But then we had the DeRolf ruling, and then we had Ohio not changing its system really between 2000 and 2021. So between over 2 decades, property taxes continued to bear the weight of school funding at the local level. And then in 2021, and we're not going to dig into this too much, but we passed the Fair School Funding Plan. So with that plan, which also had the name of the Cupp-Patterson bill, the Cupp-Patterson plan, with that plan, which had a lot of stakeholders involved, a lot of
I think we have lost Christina.
Did you lose me?
I did for a minute. I think you are back now, maybe.
Now? Am I here now?
You are here now.
Sorry.
Welcome back. That's okay.
Sorry.
We'll cut it in
I
post. We added all this stuff. I'm
That's
not going to
great.
promise
I don't
that
even know what to
to
say
be honest. Yeah.
anymore. I mean, you think we live like in a super rural area or something sometimes. But anyhow, so Fair School Funding Plan, what were the benefits to that plan? Well, essentially, it was the most constitutional plan that we had had because it factored in community wealth into the funding formula. So it wasn't just based on property values, but it was based on how much are people actually making in the area. So there was a whole new mechanism mechanism and calculation for that. And then what was even better about it, what I loved about it, because this is when I was in superintendent school that I was learning about the Cupp-Patterson bill. And what I loved was one was that it was based on the actual cost to educate children. So what does it take to educate a child living in poverty? What does it take to educate a child with special needs? There was research built into it so that every year the idea was this funding formula would update based on the actual cost at that time to educate children. And then the other thing that I really liked about it was it came with a blueprint. So it was a research-based blueprint that said, if you have this many students in your district, you should have this many principals, you should have this many counselors, you should have this many support services, it should take this much transportation. So it was a real transparency tool for communities to use to look at, okay, here is what the blueprint says based on research the district should have as far as its services. What does our district have as far as its services? So a lot of these arguments we hear about uh, the administration is too heavy or they have too much of this, that would have been completely nullified with that blueprint because it was a transparent tool, again, evidence-based, research-based to guide those conversations. So we had the Fair School Funding Plan for a few years. The thought was that it was going to be too expensive to implement all at once. So the legislature at that point in time committed to a phase-in over time. And they started out at like 33% of their responsibility and gradually were supposed to increase. In the 2025 state budget, that was the first time that the state was supposed to be at 100% of its share of implementing the Fair School Funding Plan. And instead of doing that, right at the moment, it would have been, this fair plan, this more equitable way of funding schools, and we would have fully realized what funding schools could look like. They failed to do that. So in 2025 in the budget, they effectively ended the Fair School Funding Plan by not continuing to implement it, by shortchanging Ohio schools. The number you hear a lot is $2.75 billion. That had they updated the costs to educate children, had they updated according to inflation, that would have been $2.75 billion going into our public school system. But they decided it was too expensive and they basically just kicked it out and said, we're going to just fund the way we want to fund, which is what they were doing before the Fair School Funding Plan, when annually they would just say, well, we feel like we're going to give this amount of money per student in the state of Ohio. So we're essentially back to that kind of funding mechanism. In the meantime, over that 25-year, 30-year period, the voucher program in Ohio has grown to six different options, six different programs. So in 1985, I mentioned we had the Cleveland voucher, and just quick defining, vouchers are public money that are used for private services. So Cleveland Plan, talked about that. We had the autism scholarship that came out in 2003 that was for specialized services for children with autism. And then we had the first version of Ed Choice, which happened in 2005. And the rhetoric around the first version of Ed Choice was that we've got people that are stuck in failing schools and they can't get out. And so we need to provide them an out. So typically, low-income families living in urban areas. We need to help them escape their failing school. That was the idea at first in 2005. And then in 2011, we got the special needs scholarship, which again is specialized services. And then in 2013 and in 2023, we saw this rapid expansion of the Ed Choice program. So in 2013, it was expanded to any family, anywhere, regardless of whether you had a failing school or not, as long as you were below 200% of the poverty level. And then in 2023, it was like, no holds bars. Everybody is eligible. You can be a billionaire and you're going to get at least some money after 450% of the federal poverty line, which is like $170,000 annually for a family of four. Anything beyond that, you start getting this tiered amount. But the lowest you can get, if you're a billionaire, you can get at least $620 or $850 for a voucher. So we have all of these programs going on in the state of Ohio. And the three starred ones, I wanted to make a note here. The ones that are starred are the ones that when we're talking about the Vouchers for Ohio lawsuit, Those are the ones that are in that lawsuit. The lawsuit is not taking on the autism scholarship or the special needs scholarship. They are focused on the Ed Choice and Ed Choice expansion scholarships and what has happened with those voucher programs. Interestingly, although Ohio has never fully funded its share of public education, it has always fully funded every single voucher program from its start. So there was no phase in. There was no, we're going to do this over time. When the program launched, there was no cap on the amount of money that could go into that program. There was no cap on the number of people that could take the money. Every single program has been fully funded at 100%, while our public schools have not. And just a couple of numbers, the fully funded voucher programs are about $1 billion a year. Ed Choice, those three Ed Choice programs alone are about $500 million a year, plus auxiliary services. So those are the schools, the public schools having to provide transportation, the public schools having to provide special education services, write the IEPs, do the progress monitoring of students they don't even have. But those are additional costs to public schools that go towards this voucher program. In the budget last year, for the first time ever, more money went to private schools than went to our public schools. So 500 million new dollars went to private schools and 250 million new dollars went to public schools. And as of last year, we were sitting at about 85% of students in Ohio go to public schools. So 15-ish, 10 to 15-ish percent of students got the 500 million new dollars towards their education, while everyone else only split 250 million new dollars. So the situation that has been created in Ohio, and this is going to set the stage a little more for talking about the local level, but we have seen over time this steady diversion of funds out of our public school system and into private schools. I used to say, as we look at that budget and those numbers I just threw out about, double the money going into private schools, our legislature has made it very clear where their priority lies, and it's with private school students. So, as a mom of public school kids, it feels like my kids matter less than private school kids because the state is willing to put more money. And I would make, as a parent, if I chose to send my kid to a private school than what Medina City Schools gets for my kids. So at the same time that that diversion of funds has been happening, the state has also been creating its own income shortfall. So in 2025, they flattened the income tax from 3.75 to 2.75 for the wealthiest Ohioans. That's billions of dollars that they cut out of revenue by flattening the tax. They've also continually increased corporate property tax loopholes. And I was just in a presentation this week talking about data centers and how Ohio has like the largest number of data centers. And those data centers come with tax abatements. So that is property lost to the data centers, that is lost property tax revenue to the school district because they're significantly less. They're paying significantly less in their property taxes. So as we see this scale at the bottom over time, what has happened is the state is intentionally paying less because it is reducing its revenue sources. So it's able to say, we can't afford to pay any more for public schools because we're not collecting as much money. Well, you're not collecting as much money because you're giving corporate loopholes, flattening the income tax, and you're giving tax abatements to data centers. That's why you're not collecting as much money. So at the same time that they're collecting less, they are shifting more burden onto everyday Ohioans, onto local communities. So we see property taxes going up for all of our public services. It's not just schools. Schools is one of the biggest buckets for property taxes at the local level. But it's not just schools. We see that burden shifting for all of our public services. To the tune of, and this is my last slide here, but this I think really captures it, to the tune of the state was paying 47% of its share in fiscal year 2019 of educating public school kids, and that is dropping in fiscal year 2027 to 32%. That is a 15% difference that has to be made up somewhere. It has to be made up somewhere, and the state is not giving any more. So that's why we are seeing a huge influx across the state right now of schools, one, trying to go for income taxes because they're trying to get out of being in the hole of property tax revenue. But two, the increasing frequency of any kind of tax levies, of bond levies that are going on. These are efforts to figure out where to find this 15% difference. So it hasn't been made easy on our public schools. I mean, I truly believe it's the dismantling of our system because we are strangling it out of existence. Um, One more thing I want to say, because I've seen this on some local Facebook pages around Medina County. People will say, well, the number of students is dropping, so schools don't need as much. You don't need to be funded at 47% when you've lost students. I cannot even calculate the number of students that a district would have to lose to make up a 15% loss in state revenue. I'm one student lost, one student going elsewhere, whether it be home education, charter schools, private schools, whatever. One student, 100 students, 200 students is not going to make up the difference of increasing operating costs over time. So you still have the buildings, you still have the operation costs, you still have the maintenance, you still have the buses. All of those things still continue, and they are subject to inflation. They're subject to rising gas costs. So loss of students is a drop in the bucket in comparison to this overall loss of revenue for our schools. I'm gonna, are we going to Vicky next?
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully I set you up well there, Vicky.
Yeah. So I just want to talk about the specifics in Medina. I don't know if we have anyone on the call in Medina, but this is, I mean, specific to Medina is relative to the other schools in Medina County, and I know that Julie will also talk about Wadsworth, but to just piggyback off of some of the stuff that Christina has said, in 2010, about 59% of Medina City Schools funding came from local sources. So we can call it 60% just for the ease of talking about it, which means the state was paying about 37% because we get about 3% from the federal government. Even at that level, even at that 37% level from the state at that time, that still falls under the unconstitutional level, putting too high of a burden. And what's happened is since then, in the 15, 16 years since then, the amount that the state pays is actually less. Where now we're closer to the our local contribution is about 70%. So we've dropped from about 37% of the state picking up the share all the way down to 27%. And that's just the cost per pupil that they're contributing. There are other factors in revenue loss. So we had some reimbursements. So in 2010, we received it was like around $11 million in state reimbursement funding. That was tied to tax policy, but now because of our wonderful legislation, a lot of that has changed. And so that number has dropped about half to where it's about $5.5 million instead of the almost 11%. And we're continuing to see policies go into place that take more and more money from the schools. And so there's something called the homestead exemption, which if you're a senior or low income or there are certain ways to qualify, then you get a credit on your taxes where it helps you out with your property tax bill. And the way that works is the money that the district loses is made up by the state. Well, now there's a piggyback homestead exemption that the county commissioners can choose to enact. And what that does is it increases the amount of the homestead exemption, but the state is not picking up the bill for that increase. So our county commissioners voted to increase the homestead exemption, the piggyback, for those people. And as a result, Medina City Schools is losing around $1 million per year because we're not being reimbursed for the difference of that cost. Um, which which is why Medina is talking about doing the transition to the 5, 6, 7, 8 building. That will save us about $1.5 million a year. We're not even able to plan to keep up with all the things that are happening, but we're doing our best to get ahead of some of these issues that we're facing. People often mention the casino money. That's one thing that Christina didn't talk about. The casino money is sort of a wash. The way that it works is the amount of money that the revenue, the taxes from the revenue, the percentage goes into an account, and then that is moved into the education account, and then the state just doesn't put that much more money in there. So it's kind of like a bait and switch is how I describe it. So if the lottery money is more, the state puts in less. If the lottery money is less, the state puts in a little bit more. Instead of actually giving additional dollars for the lottery. Um, Another thing that Christina mentioned was that we do have the sales tax. That is really helpful in Medina. We use the sales tax to pay for it's paying for basically the mortgage on two of our buildings, and it's also how we do the roofing and paving projects over the summer. But that money has to be used for capital improvement. So that's another question that we get is what about the sales tax money? Yes, we're able to use it for improvements without dipping into other funds for those, but we're only allowed to use it for capital improvements. Um, and then when we're talking about vouchers, we have a really interesting situation because, the information available tells us that the students accepting vouchers were overwhelmingly already going to private schools. And in Medina, we have had, since 2019, we've had 250 students. Well, it's actually 248, but we've had 248 students that have left the district to, enact full school choice that have left and returned because it didn't turn out how they thought it would. And the most common time to return is for like middle school when kids start having choice in their academic offerings. At least, I guess that's a little bit of conjecture, but that's when the timeline happens, is mostly in middle school, a little bit in elementary school, mostly in middle school, and then some also in high school because our religious schools don't obviously only go K through 8. But so what we're seeing is an overwhelming return to public schools because public schools are doing it better. Um, you know, I think that's an important conversation to have. And also, I think Christina mentioned that the religious schools, the private schools, they get to choose the students that they accept, whereas public schools accept everyone. And I know of an example this year where we had to accept a child back into the district because they were having behavioral issues at St. Francis, where if they were at Claggett or Root or anywhere else in Medina, I mean, they wouldn't have even been labeled as a problem student or behavioral issues. It's just St. Francis doesn't have the capacity to deal with anyone that steps remotely out of line. So, as far as Medina goes, we're in the same situation that everyone else is in. Um, in the county, but we get what Christina said about the Fair School Funding Plan. We get really hit hard because we're considered a wealthy district. So that's always been a factor in determining how much property tax we can raise. So that's what started the disparity in this increase of property tax, and it's why we're partially why we're in the situation that we're in. But yeah, for the most part, we're just really struggling to keep our head above water with all of the unfunded state mandates that come out and the lack of the state providing any additional funding. So that's I mean, if Christina has anything to add to that. There's also there's this tool that I can't think of what it's called, the district profile tool, that anyone the cup report. So there's this thing called the cup report that anyone can access. It's available on the Ohio Education website, and you can go and you can see how much your school's like average salary for teachers, average salary for admin, and all this stuff. Because I'll end with this. We also get hit all the time with we're carrying a lot of overhead. Our administrators are overpaid. Our teachers are overpaid. Um, if you go look at Medina City Schools CUP report, what you'll find is that our teachers have a very slightly higher salary than other schools in Medina County or similar schools. But if you look at the numbers, it's because over 70% of our teachers are well tenured teachers. You know, we don't have a lot of young teachers in Medina, and so that's when their salary hits a certain threshold. And the other thing is our administrators are actually paid less than districts of similar size and the surrounding areas. And you know, it's just the numbers don't lie when it comes to that. We have to have a certain number of people to operate the schools, and we're trying to do it as fiscally responsibly as possible. So that's all I really have on that.
Thank you, Vicky. And Julie, if you'd like to talk a little bit about Wadsworth, I know
I,
unfortunately your levy did
yeah,
not pass.
no, it did not, along with several other districts in Northeast Ohio that also fell under the same unfortunate decision by the voters. Um, Wadsworth City Schools, and I'll kind of provide a little history. Wadsworth City Schools, the last time we were on the ballot was 2021. We had a combination um, operating levy bond issue that passed pretty successfully. That issue was to obviously supplement our operating income, but also allowed us to build our new intermediate school. And that just opened last year. So at that time, we had told our community that we will probably be back on the ballot in 5 years. And here we are. So, or here we were, I guess. We went through a lot of conversation, a lot of uh, discussion, and certainly with everything that Christina and Vicky have shared concerning uh, property tax increases, property tax reform at the state level. Um, we discussed and we understood that our citizens were struggling, and we wanted to look at a way that we could hopefully generate some revenue for our district, but also take care of those who may be struggling more than our citizens. So we took a look at the earned income tax initiative, and I know a lot of districts around our area did the same. And we decided that that was the route that we would go for this levy. So on May 5th, we had a 1.5 earned income uh, tax initiative on the ballot. And we decided at that point to make it a continuous tax. Now, certainly, that was probably the number one question from our voters, from individuals on Wadsworth Neighbors. Why did you make it continuous? One of the answers certainly is that this is not, we're not facing right now one-time cash shortfall. I mean, we will be looking to increase revenue for years to come. So we needed an option or a way to have continuous income revenue coming into our district. And so we decided to make it continuous for that purpose, as opposed to perhaps a year, 2 years from now, coming back and putting another ballot up for a vote. We currently have a $6 million cash deficit. So if we had made it a 2-year or a 5-year tax initiative, again, we'd be back on the ballot in a few years. So we are certainly wanting to find, we feel, a sustainable solution. Obviously, and again, we've talked about the way that state funding has gone is, to provide fair, equitable state funding. So we have to address, both the cash balance and the ongoing gap that we have between revenues and expenditures to ensure our long-term financial stability. We are in a similar situation to where 70%, close to 70% right now, of our funding is coming from local sources, and 30% is coming from the state. 10 years ago, in 2016, we had 50% coming from the state, 50% coming from local sources. If that funding was still coming and still given to us in that same way, we wouldn't have had to even be on the ballot in May. So we wouldn't have had to even go to the ballot for that issue. So we continue, at this point in time, with the levy not passing, we are looking at having to make obviously some cuts, but we can't cut our way out of the situation. Currently, we are looking for next school year to make a reduction of 20 certified staff positions and 14 non-certified positions. We're hoping with some creative licensure, moving individuals around. We have a lot of individuals that are retiring this year that we will be able to make all of the cuts for next school year through attrition, to where no one is losing their job. We're not ripping anybody. We're hoping that can be the case for this year. We are obviously concerned for fiscal year 2028 because, again, we cannot cut our way out of this situation. We need some additional revenue source in order to maintain the quality of education, the standards that our community expects of us. Right now, a lot of the things that we do are above state standards. Our busing is above state standards. Our things that we provide for technology and for other areas in our district are above state standards. So those are the reductions that we'll probably have to look at first. We have lower class sizes in elementary education. We're going to have to take a look at, more than likely, increasing those class sizes, as well as moving children out of their neighborhood schools. Wadsworth has a neighborhood school model that our public and our citizens held on to dearly in previous levy cycles. So we have, surveyed our community to see what the priorities are for them now. So hopefully, like I said, we can make some decisions on where the cuts need to be made through attrition and through not having to lay off any individuals in our school system. Again, in 2028, we will have to decide, probably by the end of May, whether or not we put another issue levy on the ballot in November. Those are discussions that are just beginning. They're starting in a couple of weeks. I see a lot of special meetings in my future in order, to make those tough decisions and to, provide the quality education that our citizens and our residents, what they deserve. So.
Thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry because it does sound like you've got a lot of tough decisions ahead of you.
Yes, we do.
Uh, and I guess I question open to everyone, but what is the solution? Christina, I heard you mention a lawsuit. What is the solution to getting the state to pay their fair share of this? I know that's a magic wand question.
Well, it's not. We have had 30 years of a Republican-controlled legislature that has, in many of those years, had a supermajority. And I mean, I'm not saying that voting Democrat is going to change the legislature, but we have to stop voting for people that don't care about our public schools. That's it. I mean, that has to be a dividing point. And especially this year, we have a very important governor's race. And I hope people will, if they want to see their schools supported, we have so many schools across the state closing that we have to vote for people that will prioritize our public school students and will make sure that the funding is there to support our schools. So, I mean, that's like the big picture is we got to vote better. We have to
And
vote
we have
better.
to vote. Everyone, please vote. Make sure your friends and family vote. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly. Yeah, we need to certainly make sure that we do everything in power to get Amy Acton in as governor, for somebody that I truly believe, supports public education. I mean, currently, Water City Schools is on a physical or a fiscal precaution watch, which required us to do a fiscal precaution plan. But that plan couldn't include, the state wants to know how are we going to get out of, we're third year into our 4-year operating budget. How are we going to get out of the red in the third year? So we have to show them the cuts and things that we are going to make in order to do that. However, we can't include any type of levy revenue that we may be anticipating. So it becomes a struggle to where we need to have fair legislation and individuals that truly care about public education in our state house in order to start bringing about the changes. It's not going to certainly happen overnight, but finding electing individuals who truly care about public education and truly care about educating our children and taking care of our teachers and staff, and not having this continuous loop of school districts that have to go to the ballot every 2 years in order just to operate and to provide the education that our kids deserve.
Seeing a question in the chat around is the report going to be publicly available so that, members of the public can see where Wadsworth is going to have to make cuts?
Yes, it will be made available. We just had a board meeting Monday night. And really all of the cuts and things that we are needing to consider are already in this pre-fiscal watch plan that we have. It's very detail oriented. And I mean, we are beginning to look at, certainly, and we'll probably incorporate next year, besides the staffing cuts, we will be incorporating reduction in custodial supplies. We completely will probably be looking at no making no bus purchases. And I'm sorry, this is for fiscal year 27. Um, uh, Cuts in professional development, cuts in the technology budgets, no replacing vehicles, no competition field trips. I know all of our first, second graders were at the zoo. That's not going to happen unless we are able to generate some additional revenue. Chromebook replacements, that type of thing. So it's those are things that we will be detailing. And once we make the final decision on things, those are things that we will be sharing with the community. It's public information. Um, we have always been committed to being completely open and transparent with our community, and we will continue to do so once we make decisions on where we go next.
Thank you. And I know all of us have seen the Axe the Tax people. They're everywhere in the Facebook groups. But what I'm hearing from this group is that is making up 50 to 70% of your operating budget. So where does that money come from if we axe property taxes? So
I almost hate to even give this issue air
I
because
know.
I'm just so hopeful that they don't get the signatures that are needed to even get on the ballot. And should they do it, I feel like we're smart enough. I feel like there are enough of us that are smart enough that know that we can't do this because DeWine has already come out and said, we're talking about a 20% sales tax. Because the other thing is they his committee for property tax reform has also said that raising the income tax, which they just lowered, by the way, so but that's a non-starter. They said no increase to the income tax. That's a non-starter. So the only place for it to come from would be the sales tax, which disproportionately affects low income people. So it's just it'll be bad, and it won't just be bad for schools. These people aren't thinking, do you want somebody to show up when your house is on fire?
Hmm. Yeah, our
That I
property
mean,
taxes pay for a lot of things
you
that
don't
we
you don't care
all
about
use.
schools because you don't have a kid in school. Okay, what about what are our police departments, our libraries, our fire departments,
Mhm.
So no, I mean I know that there needs to be some semblance of a plan in place, but truthfully, the only option if they're saying they're unwilling to increase the sales tax because they just or the income tax because they just dropped it, sales tax is the only other option. There's three options for generating revenue. And I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but really now is the time. I mean, Julie and Christina both mentioned it, the time for change, because what we're seeing is an overwhelming number of the levies that were on the ballot in May failed.
Mhm.
And people are going to reach the tipping point. Even people who support schools are going, man, I know the schools need the money, but I can't afford it. I cannot keep my house. They're saying if the property taxes go up, I won't be able to keep my house to be in this school district.
Mhm.
So we're going to reach a point where the last of the levies have passed. And so if we don't get some different people into office, not just the governor's office, but in the Senate and with our reps, then we're going to be in big trouble very soon. And it's just there's no way around it. We need and I think Christina said this, it's not even about, Republicans versus Democrats. It's when you have such control, as it happens to be, the Republicans have had such a strong arm on our government for so long. There's no checks and balances. It's not that Democrats will swoop in and save the day. It's that when you have differencing opinions, you have to reach across the aisle and you have to talk about the things that concern each other instead of just the extreme end of the options. So I I also wanted to briefly talk about the budget commission, if that's okay.
I was gonna pitch to that, so go ahead.
Okay. All right. Because the whole thing is the budget commission had been a huge theoretical concern for months, and there was the whole, veto with DeWine, and it seemed like, well, maybe it's not going to happen, but we're seeing right now in Medina County that it's happening. And it's weird because we're the only county that, as far as I know, and Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we're the only county that where our budget commission decided to do this. And to just give some information in case there's anyone that doesn't know what the budget commission is, but every county has a budget commission, and it's the auditor, the treasurer, and the prosecutor. But in our case, our prosecutor, Forrest Thompson, recused himself. So he has now been replaced by a commissioner because per the statute, that's how it happens. So for now, which she's not running again, so it'll be someone else next year. For now, it's Colleen Swedick on the commission, and they have a new authority to reduce levies, to look at the budgets for local government entities that collect or that operate off of tax money. And they always had the authority to look at their budgets and approve them, but now they have this new authority to reduce levies. And when given the opportunity, this year, they said, you know what, we're going to take money back from every school district in Medina County except for Medina and Wadsworth. And the funny thing about that is there's actually a lot of debate over why Medina and Wadsworth were spared because, Wadsworth had a levy on the ballot, but, so did Highland. Highland had a failed levy, and they were going after Highland for more than $3 million. But so as far as we can tell, no real rhyme or reason for why they've chosen it, but this
And
commission got
and
together.
these are previously voter approved levies. To clarify for
Yes,
everyone on
yes,
the call, these are things
yes.
that the voters voted for that passed in our communities.
Yeah, I mean, it means that like our community can like publicly debate a levy, hear all the presentations about it, vote on it, approve it, have our schools build their long-term plans about it, and then only later to have some other entity come in and say, "No, we don't think you know what you were voting for," or "We don't agree with that." And reduce the money. And in the case of Brunswick specifically, they ran the numbers, the district ran the numbers, and the savings, because this is all in the name of property tax relief. That's why they claim they're doing it, because property taxes are too high. We need property tax relief. Let's reduce the levies from the school. And so in Brunswick, it would have been a savings of $8 per $100,000 of your home. So for argument's sake, if you have a $1 million home, which most people do not, you would save $80 one time. Not per year, not per month. One time, you would save $80 at the defunding, basically, of the schools, where they would almost immediately need another levy in order to make up the funds that they're going to lose. Um, and so the Budget Commission wasn't able to go through with this plan, not because they listened to the many treasurers and superintendents and board members and community members that showed up to the meetings and said, please don't override the will of the people. Please don't screw up our long-term planning in our school districts. Please let us try and explain to you how complicated school funding is. They decided not to do it because they can't legally do it because they missed a deadline. So this problem is not going away. It's just lurking around next year's corner. So we have to be vigilantly prepared for them to come back next year and maybe also come for Medina and also come for Wadsworth because again, we don't know what they're using to determine, who they go after. Um, but there is a petition going around to get two people elected to the Budget Commission, two people that have never held office, to kind of even out the board. And my hope with this, if we were able to get two additional people on the budget commission would be that we get people who actually understand school finances. I mean, it would be really wonderful if we could find like a retired school treasurer or even just a regular accountant that maybe understands budgets
Someone that
and
doesn't use
money.
Chat GPT to do math.
Yeah, so there's these petitions going around. I know in Wadsworth, like I think we're Wadsworth heavy in the group tonight. People have petitions and know about them. But
I
I
have
think that
one in
that's
Brunswick. Christina has them in Medina. So we are
yeah.
we are all over.
Yeah, so there's lots of opportunities if you haven't signed it. I also think another excellent point is, some of Ben Fuchs. Fuchs rhymes with books. Um, sorry how I have to say it to remember how to pronounce it. But he pointed out that based on the statute, it's the sitting judge that will appoint two members to the Budget Commission before we're able to have an election because or not I, but we won't be able to elect anyone until the fall because of the way that it works out. But two people would be able to be appointed by the sitting judge. So that's also a race that matters. Um, Bill
Well, one
happens to
note
be
there, Vicky,
running for
that's
that position, but oh, what, Christina?
that's not totally correct. Right now, there's no mechanism. So, Fuchs, right? Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Like now I'm gonna have to say that every
Yeah.
single time. So he was at the same meeting that I was at, where one of the county commissioners was there and said that this is like creating all of these questions that have never come up before because it hasn't been success. Like there was one other county that tried to do this initiative and it failed. And so it's looking like ours is going to pass. And now it's bringing questions. And so that was one of the questions was there is no mechanism for appointing anybody currently. So it would be we would change our county commission this fall, and then we would have to wait a whole year. So there's like some conversations happening at this point to figure out like what mechanism could be put in place and can it get done this fall in the election, which is like the end 2 year General Assembly when all of the crazy crap flies for those last 2 months of the year and they just pass all kinds of things because when the new General Assembly starts in January, anything that hasn't passed has to start over again in the process. So the question is like, can we get anyone to do something so that someone could appoint those people or because this is not just an us problem, this is going to be any other county that tries to
Mhm.
run this ballot issue in the future. They're going to have the same problem because even if you're waiting until November to get somebody out, so there's always going to be this waiting period. So is it possible to run these races in May primary? Is it possible to do an appointment like was mentioned? So I don't know. We have to first hurdle is signature collection. And while we do that, we have to keep talking about what are the interestingly too, the questions that come up here in the county have to they go through the county prosecutor first, who is a member of the county budget commission who has recused himself. So it's just like this is just a
Right. And
very
you're like, should he be
planned
making that decision?
system
Should he
as a
have
whole.
to recuse himself from that decision?
Right. Or just like I talked to the Board of Elections and they were like, some of our questions have to like go straight to the Attorney General's office where they're also trying to figure out what it means.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I've heard going to several of these meetings is the eyes of the state are on us, right? They're looking to see, does this signature measure pass? Do we get it on the ballot? Does it get voted? Is this, there are, we had the first team that decided to try and overturn levies. And so the eyes of the state were on that too. Is this going to be successful? Is this something they could repeat in other counties? Noting that at the time, one of the members of that commission was running for re-election. And so, opposing property taxes was maybe a popular move for him. So it's definitely nothing like being first in the state to do it. Medina County showing up. We love it.
And that's really to say nothing about how poorly run the Budget Commission is, how they didn't properly announce their meetings, how they changed meetings last minute, how they have no meeting minutes.
Mhm.
There are no minutes for the meetings. And I know this because the Mavens made a public records request and received all of the records related to the Budget Commission, and not a single one of them is meeting minutes. There are a lot of interesting email exchanges in there, um, but it's really just embarrassing how they don't understand Robert's Rules of Order. They don't understand sunshine laws. Um, they don't understand like open meetings. I mean, 100 people showed up to a meeting that they let about 30 people in the room. It's really just embarrassing how poorly it's been handled.
Yeah, and I believe they also were kind of appointing people to speak for them in their absence, but they don't actually have a like process for that. Yeah, it's been I think we definitely need more people on that commission. Oh, you trying to talk, Julie? You're on mute.
Trying to unmute myself at the wrong place. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're
Another
good.
thing, and this has nothing, you know, to do with the budget commission, but our treasurer has recently shared um, the impact of failed levy will have on our credit rating. So, currently right now, Standard and Poor's is reviewing our credit rating because our levy failed. And that's just not going to affect our school district. It's also going to affect, you know, all of the other entities in our city. If our credit rating is, um, you know, not good, it drops from our levy failing, then it's just going to affect other entities within our district. So that's just something else to consider as these levies are put on the ballot and failed. Then our credit rating is looked at in drops to where our credit rating obviously has been excellent for years. And so that's just another effect of what's occurring now in our state,
Yeah.
in our city, in our county, everywhere.
Yeah. And it is circular too, right? When
Yes.
when folks are looking where they want to buy a house and why
Correct.
whether or not they think the property taxes are worth
Yep.
it, right? They're looking at your school district. I mean, my husband and I bought in 2021, and like that was the first thing the realtor wanted to talk about was, this is a great school district and they've got this and they have these features, and it's harder to get people to want to move to your city if they're thinking, I want to have kids, I want to raise my kids here. Well, what if there aren't buses? What if, we have children crammed into tiny schools? It all adds up and comes back.
And it's not just going to affect the cities, it's going to affect our entire state. We're going to see
Mm-hmm.
young people who don't come home.
Yeah.
They're going to go somewhere else where they can, find a better job, have a better school for their kids. These are generational, like generational damage is what's happening.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree.
All right. Well, on that somber note, I think that's all I have. I appreciate everyone who came out to present, everyone who came out to attend. Reminder to all of you that this is brought to you by you and that Zoom presentation mode is fairly expensive. So if you can see fit to drop a couple dollars in our Venmo or on our website, we definitely appreciate it. We are a small organization and we keep the lights on, but barely. So appreciate all of you, especially appreciate our presenters, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.